Alright guys, so this is the last video here, and again this is a proof here where they're saying sine to the fourth power minus 1 over cosine squared equals cosine squared minus 2. And so I went ahead and said this is the answer, and I'm going to go through this one with y'all just so you can see it. So I went ahead and wrote it here. Again, this is the answer, and the top part, the numerator here, has to deal with this property where sine squared plus 1 times sine squared minus 1 would equal this. So if I were to redistribute this, I would get sine squared, sine to the fourth, because sine squared times sine squared is sine to the fourth, minus sine squared, and then plus sine squared, and then 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. So these cancel. So just went through it with y'all. Again, this right here is equal to that. It's a property of factoring and distribution. So I'm going to rewrite this as sine squared plus 1 times sine squared minus 1 over cosine squared. Okay, so at this point, again, this right here does not look like that. So we're going to have to do some work here. Again, here, I don't know why they didn't give you this one, but this property right here is what we're going to use. Cosine plus sine squared equals 1. And if I do that, I'm going to write this off to the side. I could subtract the cosine, right? And then subtract the 1. So I'm going to be left with sine squared minus 1 equals negative cosine squared. Okay, which I see I have that right here. So instead of writing sine squared minus 1, I'm going to write negative cosine. So I'm just replacing this with this. So again, I have sine squared plus 1, and I'm going to go ahead and write the negative cosine in the front because it is negative and I don't want to lose that. And I see these cancel, so I'm left with negative sine squared plus 1, just like this. Obviously right now this does not equal that. So again, I'm going to use my same Pythagorean property. Again, I'm writing it off to the side. And I mean, just notice that the answer has to have cosine squared. So here I'm going to change this sine squared into a one minus cosine squared. And I'm going to plug it in over here. So instead of sine squared, I'm writing 1 minus cosine squared and plus 1. And here at this point, guys, now I can add like terms. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So I still have the negative out here. And now it's 2 minus cosine squared. And then when I distribute the negative, this becomes negative 2, and negative times negative is positive, so plus cosine squared, which when I rearrange it is cosine squared minus 2, which is the answer that I was looking for. So again, using that property, we used it quite a bit, I can get to the answer. Okay. So the final question that I was going to go over is again this one right here, where I'm going to use the same property we were just using. Okay, so again, I'll go over it and you can see here what I did. So I have a problem because this is cosine squared sine, and in order to solve, because here it's asking me to solve, I need to have only one of those trig identities, whether it's cosine, sine, tangent, all of those. It can only be one. So I do have a property that I can change this cosine squared into a sine. Okay. If I subtract the sine, okay, I see that cosine is equal to 1 minus sine. That's what I'm going to go ahead and use here. So instead of writing cosine, I'm going to write 1 minus sine squared plus 2 sine x equals 2. Okay, so at this point, I don't like having a negative sign in the front. Let me rearrange this before I move on. Okay, so I'm going to, oops, it's adjusting. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, well, I'm going to subtract the 2. And I don't like having a negative in the front, but we'll go ahead and work with it this way. At this point, guys, now I see I have sine and sine. Problem is I can't combine them because this one's squared, this one's not. But I have like a squared term, an x term, and then a constant. So I could use my factoring with a, b, and c to solve this problem. Where a is -1, c is also -1, and b is 2. So here I'm going to do a times c, which is -1 times -1, which is a positive 1. And over here, I need my sum to equal 2. So if I use 1 and 1, because 1 times 1 is 1, and if I add them, it equals 2, I get my factors here. So this is sine, excuse me, not sine squared. This would be sine x plus 1 and, not squared, sine x plus 1. Okay, and since they're the same, I could say that this is sine x plus 1 squared equals 0. So if I were to solve for this, guys, I'm going to square root it. Square root it. So sine x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1, subtract 1. Sine x equals -1. And so at this point now I can look at the unit circle, and I'm going to look at the point where is my y value, my sine, equal to -1. Well, there's only one point, and I don't have the unit circle in front of me, but it's where my angle is equal to -3 pi over 2. So this is the only answer. Again, I got this from the unit circle, and that is it for the review, guys.